Hello and welcome to the Gnostic Rebellion. Today we're speaking with Neil Gordon, a novelist and Substack writer whose work explores the continuity of consciousness, reincarnation, and the unseen architecture shaping human experience. I'll be sure to put a link to this program on my and on my personal Substack. I wrote that poorly. Sorry about that. His current project, The Lemurians, a New Testament for the Soul, is being written and released in real time, chapter by chapter. It blends metaphysics, mythology, and contemporary inquiry, following a writer whose reflections on cosmic memory spark a collective awakening. Much of that project, and really much of his work overall, asks how memory, myth, and identity weave together across lifetimes. Before us, a man of genius and inspiration, motivated by his own heart. We'll introduce him in a moment. But first, um, in the description of this video, you're going to find a donate link that not only supports this program, but the work of maintaining our historic building and congregation. We're the first fully owned and operating Gnostic church on the continents of the Americas, and your donations are tax deductible. While you do that, we'll extend this blessing. May wisdom and divine providence increase the unique genius of our congregation and bring us to health, wealth, and increase of days. Okay, that being said, um, Neil Gordon, welcome to the Gnostic Rebellion.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're glad to have you. We gave you an introduction, but I'd like you to tell us who you are. So please introduce yourself and tell us about what motivates and inspires your work.
Well, I go by the name of Neil Perry Gordon. I always make sure to use my middle name, which in that of itself became an interesting story as of late. I was always told by my maternal grandfather to make sure I use my middle name, Perry, which stood for Pincus. So in the Jewish tradition, you're named after a deceased relative using their initial. So he was Pincus, I was Perry, but my first name is Neil, so I was named after Nathan. So I knew there was some sort of the grandparents were having a disagreement about, as I was the first grandchild, who I would be named after. So I always imagined that my father's father got the better of the argument and won it, and they named me Neil after Nathan. And I always thought that Nathan was my great grandfather up until about a week ago. And a week ago, I learned that Nathan was not my great grandfather. He was my grandfather's brother, my great uncle. And I was shocked to hear that from my mother, who's 67 years old and never heard this story before. So, so I find out who this person is. And what happened was that Nathan passed away, and my father came home to go to the funeral. He was in the army up in Niagara Falls and met my mother at that moment at the bus stop. So if it wasn't for the passing at that time of my great uncle Nathan, my parents would have never met. So
Wild.
yeah, so I have a whole new understanding of Nathan now, of whom I was named after, and I deeply apologize to Nathan for not holding him in higher esteem.
Well, I wrote in my note here, Neil Perry Gordon, so we have that down.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like the way I like Paul Joseph Rovelli. I don't like Paul Rovelli.
Sounds better. It's a better flow to it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, better flow to it, I think. But so we've got an introduction to your naming and your birth.
Good
We've
place to
got the
start.
nativity.
Yeah.
um, Tell us about yourself and what motivates you about your work.
Well, I grew up, I mentioned to you before in our little preliminary discussion, I grew up, went to a Waldorf school, a Green Meadow Waldorf School, which is not far from where I am now. I live in Park Ridge, New Jersey. This Waldorf school is in Chestnut Ridge, New Jersey, just 10 minutes from here. And that really gave me a good foundation of exploring the creative aspects of life. Whereas a lot of my friends who I grew up with have no clue or nor desire or looking into these aspects that Waldorf education and my fellow students who I grew up with have that in common. So that put me on this path, I believe, and also the desire to be creative. To me, that's probably the biggest motivating force I have is try to create
Do you
something.
feel that you got your creativity from your education?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
from Waldorf education gave me that. If I went to public school, I don't think I would have developed that at that, that young age.
What do you
Um,
think Waldorf did that you were able to take this from them?
well, that's what Waldorf is all about. It's about, the child learning through creativity. I mean, that's really what Rudolf Steiner, who was the founder of Waldorf education, um, when he set up the first Waldorf school, was about using creativity and learning. And, for example, there's no textbooks at a Waldorf school. Everyone makes their own textbook. Um, so, even just with that alone, that in itself is that, we're creating the knowledge that we're learning as we're learning it. So that aspect has really stuck with me. And I always felt that the best way for me to learn something is either to write about it or to teach it. Um, and that's really been my guiding force through all these years. I've written now, I just came out with my 16th novel, which is being published on December 11th on your birthday,
Yeah,
uh, and my son's birthday.
yeah.
That's been a good journey. And as you mentioned too in the introduction, I'm writing a serialized novel, which is the first one I've done, where each chapter, as I write it, I publish it. So in real time. So usually what I do is I'll write the whole story. Will take me a half a year to write it, and then I'll go back and I'll rewrite it and edit it. And this is going out raw.
Huh?
Um, so it's whole different experience.
Have you been
And
getting feedback on that?
yeah, I've been getting feedback, um, nice feedback. So this, as you mentioned, the name of it is The Lemurian, a New Testament for the soul. And I pulled a lot of this knowledge from Steiner's talks about the meditations about Lemuria as the pre-Atlantean type of civilization. So I've created this idea that Lemuria was um, the, the foundation of creation itself. And actually, my inspiration came from this three-eye atlas that's now crossing our solar system. Are you familiar with this comet that's going across our solar system right now?
Oh yeah, with the three tails or something like that?
Yeah. Well, it's called Three-Eye Atlas. So it means the third interstellar comet. And interstellar means it's coming from one solar system to the next solar system. So
Right.
this comet is billions of years old.
Hmm.
And it's streaking across our solar system as we speak. And I was thinking, what if, and I like these what if scenarios, what if this comet that's streaking across is not a comet, it's not organic in nature, but actually comes from some consciousness. So what if we know and we are able to discover that without any more speculation, but scientifically, for all those doubters out there, that there is extraterrestrial life, and if there is extraterrestrial life, how does that relate to my belief about reincarnation? Um, so I started to think about that and try to put that in perspective, and I came up with the idea, which is the idea how I'm relating this in the story, is that consciousness was born here on Earth. We're reincarnated here on Earth. And until we evolve and are ready to move on, that's when we move on to these other planetary spheres. So if the creator created consciousness everywhere, not just here on Earth, but on all other places where there consciousness exists, um, then we can understand, yeah, that our belief in reincarnation is not, you know, tossed out the window because of this knowledge of extraterrestrial life. Is only enhanced. Um,
Well,
so
now does let's pretend right now because the world acts as if it really doesn't know.
right,
Some scientists will say there must be just do the numbers. It's an infinite universe. There's, infinite versions of each of us somewhere. Um, and so we have to really ask if the knowledge of these extraterrestrials, what does that tell us about ourselves, that these extraterrestrials exist?
Right. Yeah, that's
And
the
what do you
premise.
speculate that might be?
One source of consciousness. So we all share this. When we're in a human form, these other consciousness might be in another type of a form, but there's still a consciousness. So, um, we have images of these aliens with these big eyes and no hair and tall and thin and don't wear clothes. Um, but whatever form they're in, there's still a form of consciousness, and there's still part, and they do come from the creator. So we're all sharing that together. So we're just basically, I don't want to say the lowest form of consciousness, but where this is where we all begin. We begin here on Earth. Again, this is all what I created in my fictional mind. We all begin here on Earth. We try to move on from one life to the next. And we stay here until we figure it out. And then when we do figure out, we do move on to another plane.
Okay,
Um,
so you're really, I mean, this idea is not unique to religion. I mean, certainly Hinduism kind of gets the same idea. The cycle and Buddhism, the cycle of death and rebirth until you're finally free of it, even ancient Gnosticism. But the Hindus would tell you that you would go to other planets,
yeah.
and perhaps maybe even the Mormons and other more Western groups like that. I've always thought that. I shouldn't say I've always thought. I've wrestled with reincarnation myself for a long, long time. Um, couldn't really figure out whether it was or not. And I kind of lean into it now. I think that I've always been of the earth and always will be of the earth. My consciousness is the earth. I realize religions talk about that starry consciousness that's, comes in and gives us a spirit that enervates our soul, and I feel that intuitively. Um, but I think there's something to the nature of an individuated human soul that stays of the earth. I think other souls that come of the earth, can really bust up on death because they're zombies. They're people who have not held their life into a creative mindset, for want of a better phrase.
Right. And I also had those same thoughts until I threw in this wrench of the idea of extraterrestrial life. So if extraterrestrial life exists, what happened? What's their story? Okay, where do they come in with this whole idea of reincarnation, and why is there another consciousness somewhere else? Um, in what Steiner talked about in Lemuria was that we were beings not in the human form per se. There was this translucent type of life, and we didn't speak languages. We spoke through sound or transmissions or energy. And this collective idea was this amazing utopia. But in order for humans to evolve, they had to go from this collective us to the individual I. And once that happened, that was the end of Lemuria. And all those individuals, all those beings reincarnated into humans. Um, so that's where this whole thing began for me. And then I started seeing this comet streaking across the sky, once you get into an Instagram or whatever, you get onto these algorithms, you get sucked into this bubble, and that's all you see for a while. So I've been seeing all these images and all these astronomers and astrophysicists talking about this comet streaking across the sky and wondering if it's just a natural phenomenon or actually some intelligence centered here. And so that got me thinking, and that's why I ended up trying to pursue those ideas in this story that I'm writing now.
So you would say like consciousness on XYZ planet that produces an extraterrestrial that we would interact with.
Right.
You would say that's would could quite probably be a different consciousness.
It's a conscious, no, we're all consciousness, right? Once we have the idea of being self-aware, we have a consciousness. So if we all have consciousness, it's consciousness seeking matter, right? So consciousness seeking some sort of form. So consciousness for us gave us our human body. Consciousness somewhere else in some other planetary system could find its matter in another form. So it's consciousness that's really the universal, thing that keeps getting reincarnated and moving on and on. Our body is
Have you
just the form.
considered that absolutely everything is alive?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't pursued it in terms of what I write, in terms of like
Okay.
a rock being alive, but I did write about that. Like for example, when you go to a sweat lodge, have you been to a sweat lodge? And you go in there and they put the rocks in the fire, and those rocks are alive. I mean, you see them glowing and beating like a heart, and you realize, yeah, even the rocks have some sort of life force to it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Blavatsky is very, very good at pointing that out. Um, and of course, Blavatsky and um, Steiner had their own kind of splitting of ways at one point. He wasn't following her down the road, but I think there's a mutual starting point between the two. He would have been a better theosophist had he stayed than the group we got now. Um, but that's a whole other, bull wax. You write that your novels have explored such terrain as soul journeys and thresholds between worlds.
yeah. Well, I this also relates to this current writing. So, I wrote about the idea of bloodline versus soul line. So, bloodline is our ancestry, our physical ancestry, what gave us our physical bodies, right? Going back, and we hold so much to that. It's so important. I'm a Jew, and that's it. My parents were Jews. My grandparents were Jews. I'm a Jew. I'm thinking, well, what if I wasn't a Jew in a past life? I could have been something completely different. So why am I so tied into this tribal mentality of this physical ancestry, where my bloodline is more important than my soul line? And that works somewhat well. And, it elevates you above some of the craziness we see right now, especially uh, with the idea that really committed to that. But let me say one thing with this whole thing that was going on in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine, Gaza, that I thought I was above this conflict in terms of my own thinking I'm more into the soul line than my bloodline. But once this thing started going and I started seeing the rise of anti-Semitism, it definitely riled me up. And I don't know if it was my ancestors summoning me to the cause or anything, but all of a sudden my soul line philosophy was out the window and I was enraged with this whole thing that's going on. So yeah,
Well,
this is the
I'm an
human condition.
Italian. I take great pride in being Italian. I'm upset over the whole Columbus Day, Indigenous People Day conflict. There was a reason,
Mhm.
Italians had their own difficulties coming into this country, and that holiday exists for that. So I take something of that, but um, I don't regard these social movements as anything more than that. I mean, I'm pissed off at the kids for, being pro Hamas, in the way that they did, but um, they're kids. I did stupid things when I was that age too. I mean, we didn't throw soup on a painting, but, that's for them to express
Well,
themselves.
that's the age of romanticism. That's
Yeah, the age of romanticism. And I think, there's something about, um, it's okay to take pride in your material heritage and in our ethnic heritages. um I've gotten to know all kinds of different ethnic heritages, and each one of them, always has something special to it. I don't have to necessarily buy into the metaphysics, right? I don't have to buy into that religion, to, I've I've shown up at a Passover meal. I've done the not really done the tea ceremony, but been in a situation where that was held, um, and just other such things. And when you start to taste foods and smell aromas and uh, all of that, you could get lost in any one of them. But where it hits, the element of the ego, where I take, some identity, I think I only have to measure how much of that identity I'm taking. I mean, come on, being Italian and that whole kind of thing is, like 1% of my identity. I just recognize it's there.
Yeah, well, the traditions are wonderful, and
Yeah,
and the family gatherings are wonderful, and what you could, and what you could share with other Italians or what I share with other Jews is unique and wonderful.
yeah, it's the food I eat,
But it doesn't really just, it's not all of me. Um,
Remember, especially as I've come to know the Jewish community very well, grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, as I've always said, Italians and Jews are really very much alike. They spent a lot of time in Rome together. Italians are just prettier. Um, so, how does the inner life guide you? And really, maybe I should make a reference to your process of creativity in putting your ideas together for novels. Like you've been
yeah.
following a lot of these news stories on the comet coming across the sky and reading some maps and stuff like that. Um, how is that kindling your creativity? What is it? How do you go through? What process do you put to that?
Well, first of all, writing, I think, as an art form is probably the number one art form that when you're really totally in your own head. I mean, it's just everything comes out of you. That's a very intimate expression of one's art. Um, and and when I write, sometimes I get emotional responses, which is the goal of any writer, be it they agree with me or disagree with me. Usually I hear from people who disagree with me rather than those who are, don't want to say anything, but are
Isn't that a
probably,
little richer though? I mean, often
oh,
enough,
I
I, I
love
write-
it.
I produce something. I want somebody to make a comment on it. Affirmative. May you think of something else. But
Yeah.
sometimes that criticism, it's at least it's something.
Oh, I love it. I love getting feedback, no matter what it is. Some people say, "Oh, aren't you upset?" And I go, "No, I'm happy. I'm not happy I made someone else upset, but I'm happy that they were upset enough to come and challenge me on something." So yeah, I love all that idea of my art creating something that is emotional.
Yeah.
So
Now, do
yeah,
you have a process you go through? Like, are you deliberately, reading all of this comment information, going through everything that you're going through? Are you smell an idea,
yeah. Well, I got the idea. I'm now I just follow the comment for my own amusement, but it already kindled this idea. To come up with an idea to write a book is, I mean, there's lots of ideas, but there's not many that can carry you through 80,000 words. Um, and that's the challenge. So I've started quite a few books where I've gotten 40,000, 50, even 60,000 words and stopped because it just wasn't carrying itself through. But this story that I'm writing about the Lemurians, a New Testament for the soul, I've never written faster. It's not even, I think it's not even, I think this weekend is a month since I started, and I already have over 35,000 words, which is almost half a book. So I've never written this fast. And I think the reason is because it's just perfect for me where I'm at in terms of getting this story idea out. I really don't even know where it's going yet. Not that I know where most of my books end up. It's just an ongoing process. So I don't write with an outline. So I like to be surprised of where this will go, because if I'm surprised, then certainly the reader will be surprised. But we'll see. I mean, yeah, I've done this a long time. Like I said, I've written 16 novels. This would be my 17th. So I know what you need for good storytelling, and I know how you have to
Yeah.
hold the interest of a reader. But I never did it in this format where I'm publishing a chapter at a time. I might have to end up doing two chapters at a time because it's going to take too long. It'll take a whole year basically for someone to read this book, one chapter at a time. But as I'm downloading or publishing each chapter, I'm also uploading it to my website so people can catch up there and read all the back chapters if they haven't started yet. So right now there's 4 chapters up on my website.
Putting this element of surprise that you sometimes produce in your creative process as you build the work. Um, just putting that aside a moment, uh, I there's something I call the Rosicrucian novel. And I think this is true in examining the body of works of, most, if not all, artists that are, seriously committed to their art in one way or another. And I think, but especially in the realm of writing, I think uh, even though you're putting stories and you're talking about other things, you're bringing in elements that are consequential to the state of human affairs. I mean, no novel is worth its meat if it doesn't deal with that, as a work of art. Um, and so uh, ultimately, though, the artist reveals how his or her own soul is put together through that body of work. You
Yeah.
know, um, would you say that you see yourself in these novels,
Oh,
even
yeah.
though you're not a character or what have you?
Absolutely. They all have some element of me. Every protagonist pretty much could be a version of me, for sure. I'm always a good guy, of course,
Well, yeah,
but I
and
do
maybe
have
you're
I do
always the
have an
bad guy too,
antagonist.
because we all have a wee bit of the devil in us.
I have an antagonist that's also me. I wrote this series. Actually, the fourth book is coming out on your birthday. The Alaska Adventures of Percy Hope. So Percy Hope is my protagonist, but I have a reoccurring antagonist through all 4 books called Magnus Vega, and he has been my dark side. Yeah, as I've been writing about him and using him moving
Have
forward.
you
So
learned anything about your own dark side through this?
yeah, I mean, I know all about my dark side, and I know what it consists of and expressing it in a hidden way. Now that it's not a secret anymore. Anyone who reads this, reads those novels will know my dark side. But I'm happy to share. Yeah, but it's good. It's writing for me is a very good process, especially in handling grief. That has been probably the number one thing that pushed me more into metaphysical than before. I mentioned
Now, your late son, born on December 11,
Sam was born December 11th, 1988. He died January 27th, 2021. So this January 27th will be 5 years. So I wrote a story after he passed, and I wanted to deal with his grief, obviously. So, I looked to the Jewish tradition, and then I also looked at Steiner. And it was Steiner's uh, theosophy or philosophy about connecting with the dead, how to connect with the dead, that really gave me the best support I could find during my grieving process. And as a writer, at that point, I think I wrote 12 books at that when he passed, and I decided to write a story about his journey. The book begins at his death, the moment of his death, and it ends at the moment of his rebirth. And it's called Between Two Gates. And so it's called A Young Man's Quest Toward Birth. And I used Act One was Steiner's philosophy of what happens after we pass. Act Two was Kabbalah. I used the version of Kabbalah of the afterlife journey. And then Act Three was him preparing for his new life. Again, time with a lot of Steiner's philosophies. And that was a really helpful way for me to cope with my son's death. It was, as you can imagine, devastating. For me, it was a spiritual awakening. And no other way I could have had that by living through that terrible time. But it was a spiritual way. So that was the gift he gave me rather than me giving him a gift as a father to his son gave me the gift of a spiritual awakening. And yeah, so the book became a wonderful account for me. This is the copy of the book, Between Two Gates. Actually, the cover of this book is done by an anthroposophical artist. It's a Steiner style of watercolor. It was used for a poster for a Eurythmy performance of Journey Towards Birth. And that was what actually gave me the idea of writing the book, was this performance called Journey Towards Birth. I was like, well, okay, I like that. I need to use that idea and write this story. So that's why the poster, it became the cover, became the story, became my way of dealing with the grief of losing my son.
It just sounds like a wonderful way. Um, oh, there's so much more I really want to get to, but we're coming to the end of our program here. Uh, we're going to have to get together again at some point, I hope before too long. This has been a great discussion. I'm going to include some links to your website, to your Substack. Um, but as a parting shot here, give us a summary of your work to date and what's in the works for you now.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm working on the Lemurian, a New Testament for the soul. So yeah, catch up if you go to my Substack, sign up. It's free, and enjoy chapter by chapter. And then if you do read it, give me some feedback. I'd love to hear from you. So yeah, it's my email is there, everything is there. I'm very transparent, very easy to get a hold of. So I would love to have conversations with people who read it, and of course, having this type of conversation, an interview with you, and it's always my favorite thing to do. So I thank you for,
It makes you real. It brings you to life.
yeah,
Okay, so with that, we'll tell our audience good night, and we'll end the recording part of our session here. So hopefully everyone will get some nice feedback on the video as well, and we'll hear from you again soon.